Okay, so we've all heard, and I hope have been praying about what's happening on the Korean Peninsula. I think on Friday you found out that we have a delegation here, and actually Reverend Jarrar mentioned yesterday that they're going to meetings in DC and meetings with the administration. And so we have a special greeting coming to us from Reverend Young Ju Kim, who is the General Secretary of the National Council of Churches in Korea, and Dr. Jong Sun No will translate for us. Amen. So this is special. This is for free. You got it for free, and it's hot off the press. So not everybody can say they went somewhere and heard exactly what is needed in prayer and what's needed in terms of advocacy in Korea. And so we welcome them now to come, and please give them a warm welcome.
여러분의 귀중한 시간을 주셔서 감사합니다. 오늘 제가 이 귀중한 시간에 여러분들에게 말씀드리고 싶은 것은 우리 한반도를 위해서 특별하게 기도를 요청하기 위해서입니다.
I deeply appreciate for your invitation to be for me to able to introduce you what's going on in Korean Peninsula, and then we are asking for your prayers on Korea.
한국은 우리 민중의 힘으로 독재자를 탄핵하고 새로운 대통령을 선출하고 있는 매우 중요한 시기를 지금 지나고 있습니다.
Korea is in a process of, as you know, impeach the President Park Geun-hye, and will be electing new president by 9th of May. This is critically important season.
이런 중요한 시기에 미국은 우리 한반도의 상주라는 지역에 사드를 배치하려고 하고 있습니다.
This critical moment, American forces very quick to deploy THAAD, Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, abruptly.
사드는 북한의 핵을 막는다라는 그 명분을 내세우고 있지만은 저희들이 알기로는 사드는 북핵을 위한 것이 아니라 러시아와 중국을 겨냥한 것으로 알고 있습니다.
This THAAD system nominally known to defend the missile, the nuclear missile attack coming from North Korea, but in fact, this is targeted against the Russia and China.
한반도의 사드의 배치는 한반도가 주변 4강대국의 그 전쟁의 그 엄청난 배치로 말미암아 분쟁의 한복판에 설 수 있을 것입니다.
Korea will be the center of the conflict between the four big powers: Russia, China, USA, Japan.
사드 배치가 우리 한반도에 제2의 전쟁이 일어나지 않을까 염려하고 있습니다. 실질적으로 미국은 북한 핵을 핑계로 선제 타격론을 유포하고 있습니다.
Actually, this will be probably the second war coming to Korea. United States is thinking about preemptive attack on North Korean targets.
우리 모두가 다 알다시피 한반도의 평화는 무력으로 이룰 수 없습니다.
Korean peace will never be achieved by arms struggle.
더군다나 지금 미국이 사드를 배치하려고 하는 지역은 한국의 종교인 하나인 원불교의 성지와 같은 지역입니다. 종교의 자유를 최고의 가치로 세운 미국이 종교의 성지에 사드를 배치한다는 것은 도무지 이해할 수 없는 일입니다.
United States is known as the country respecting religious freedom, but the place Saad system is deployed is the sacred place of circle Buddhism, which is the originally started in Korea.
두 번째 여러분들이 좀 기도해 주셔야 할 것은 우리나라의 평화를 위해서 좀 기도해 주시기 바랍니다.
Secondly, we are asking for your prayer, particularly for peacemaking in Korea.
한국인들에게는 남북의 분단은 원죄와 같은 것입니다.
For Korean people, division of North and South Korea is the kind of an original sin.
1950년에 일어났던 한국 전쟁 이후에 지금 67년 동안 한반도는 전쟁의 한가운데 서 있습니다.
Korea is in the middle of the war. The originally Korean War started in 1950, but we are still in a period of war for 67 years.
미국은 1950년도 1월에 한반도 북한을 경제 봉쇄를 해놓고 아직까지 봉쇄의 정책을 펴고 있습니다.
United States began applying economic sanctions against North Korea since January of 1950, and that sanctions going on until this morning.
그동안의 한반도는 전쟁과 갈등의 상태에 있고 우리가 민주주의를 발전한다든지 경제가 발전되는데 큰 걸림돌이 되고 있습니다.
Actually, the major obstacle for the development of democracy and economic growth is because of this U.S. policy on North Korea, sanctioning against North Korea.
우리 한반도의 사람들의 마음도 발전하고 있지 못합니다. 우리는 흑백 논리의 노예가 되고 있습니다.
Korean people became the slave of black and white logistics logics. The Korean people's mind is no longer free anymore.
미국은 지난 60년 동안 봉쇄 정책을 통해서 한반도의 평화를 갖고 올 수 없다는 사실들을 확인하고 있음에도 불구하고 여전히 북한에 대한 봉쇄 정책을 통해서 한반도의 평화를 지키려고 하고 있습니다.
United States is trying to make peace in Korea by sanctioning against North Korea, and then everyone knows this sanction policy for the last 60 years never achieved peace until today.
세계 전쟁 역사상 60년여 년 동안 휴전인 나라는 대한민국밖에 없습니다.
Korean Peninsula is the only peninsula in the world where there is a war going on for 60 years.
이 휴전 협정의 한 당사자가 미국입니다.
One of the party for this armistice agreement is United States of America.
그래서 미국은 이 북쪽하고 남한하고 중국하고 평화 협정을 시작하는 것을 통해서 한반도의 평화 문제를 풀어야 됩니다.
United States can solve the whole issue of peacemaking by peace treaty making between North Korea, South Korea, China, and USA.
그래서 이때까지 60년 동안 실패한 정책을 되풀이하지 마시고 이제는 평화 협정을 세우는데 앞장서야 될 것이고 오늘날 이 자리에 참석한 평화를 사랑하는 기독교인들이 미국의 정책을 움직여서 우리가 그 평화 협정을 맺는 일에 여러분들이 좀 앞장서 주시기를 바랍니다.
I pray that every one of you standing and then in front of this whole movement for peace treaty making, and then United States already know this the sanctioning policy has been a failure for the last 6 years. So USA should begin to make a peace treaty now.
한반도의 평화의 출발은 평화 협정을 맺는 일로 시작이 된다고 합니다. 우리 그리스도인들의 적극적인 참여, 앞장서는 것을 통해서 한반도의 평화가 이루어질 것이고, 우리 평화는 곧 세계의 평화가 이루어질 것으로 믿고, 우리 기독교인, 한국의 기독교인들은 미국의 기독교인들의 협력을 간절히 기대하고 있습니다. 우리 모두 다 함께 그리스도인으로서 평화를 이루는데 앞장섰으면 좋겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Actually, the beginning of peacemaking will be started by peace treaty making, and then Christians should be more positive, affirmative to make this kind of a peace treaty in Korea. Peace treaty in Korea will make the whole world peacemaking successful. And I like to invite all the Christians in this room and also all the people in the United States together with our struggle, go together and be successful on peacemaking in Korean Peninsula. Thank you.
Amen. I know that we are a little behind schedule, so I don't want to apologize for that, but I do want to pray for them very quickly. Do you mind if they stand? Can you stand? Yeah. And I don't know if you don't feel comfortable doing this, don't, but in my tradition, we would put our hands toward them. And let's just pray. God, we thank you for our brothers and sisters in Korea. God, we know that they have been in war for a long time, that they must be weary, that they must be living in fear. But we know, oh God, that you have overcome fear. And so we ask that even as they are on this mission of peace here in the United States, that you would give them courage and boldness, that it would be your words in their mouth, that they would be able to have meetings that are successful, that get through all of the muck and the mire, that a voice of peace and peacemaking will prevail in the name of Jesus. We ask, oh God, that you would encourage the people of Korea, oh God, all along the peninsula, that where families have been torn apart, oh God, and where people are literally living in fear and afraid and not knowing, some of them where their next meal will come from, some of them where the next bomb will go off, oh God. We pray your peace upon that nation, and we ask, God, that you would move in a mighty way, that truly this is a moment for Christians and for others around the world who believe in peace would speak up and speak out, that our prayers would even be protests in this land, that we would not have another war on our hands, but that peace would prevail. We pray this and ask this in the mighty name of Jesus, who is the Prince of Peace. And we pray it trusting and believing that it can be and shall be done in accordance with your will. Amen. 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 Thank you so much for being here and for sharing. Lord, have mercy upon us. It is an appropriate moment for us to talk about the global impact of U.S. militarism. How God can just work some things together that we did not plan. And so without further ado, I want to introduce our moderator, Raed Jarrar. The Policy Impact Coordinator for the American Friends Service Committee will be our moderator. He will come up and introduce the rest of the panel. And just a little bit about Raed. Since his immigration to the U.S. in 2005, he's worked on political and cultural issues pertaining to U.S. engagement in the Arab and Muslim worlds. He is widely recognized as an expert on political, social, and economic development in the Middle East. He has testified in numerous congressional hearings and briefings, and is also a frequent guest on national and international media outlets in both Arabic and English. You are in good hands, and so we welcome him as he comes.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Raed Jarrar. I'm the Government Relations Manager with the American Friends Service Committee. AFSC is a Quaker organization, and we're actually celebrating our 100th anniversary this week. As you all know, Quakers are obsessed with militarism. So we work on this all the time. Today's panel will focus on the global impact of U.S. militarism, and from our three speakers, we will hear about the U.S. Impact in the Middle East, in Palestine, in some countries in Southeast Asia, maybe like focusing on South Korea, and some countries in Africa. But before we talk about that, I think realizing that this comes in a very sensitive moment for us here in the US, where militarism is on the rise. And militarism is on the rise not only because of the rhetoric that we've been hearing, the xenophobia that we've been noticing, the racism and Islamophobia that we've been hearing that is becoming more mainstream than before, but also because of military spending. So the US is the #1 spender on militarism in the world. By far, we're #1. And unfortunately, this administration is not only continuing this unreasonable level of military spending, they're increasing it.
Right.
They're not only increasing it, they're increasing it by cutting funding to other important needs.
Thank you.
So many of our organizations have worked on this for decades, and we were told by Washington, D.C., that we are naive because we wanted to move the money from military spending to domestic human needs.
Yeah, right.
No, they told us it doesn't work that way. You don't know how the budget works. You can't move the money between domestic and military. Now we have a president who wants to move the money from domestic human needs to military spending.
Insanity.
So it's time for us to work on that, and work on that very hard, to say no to more military spending. No more to military spending because it's going to impact our communities, and no more to military spending because it will impact the world. We will cause more death and destruction around the world.
Amen.
I wanted to read a short quote from Dr. King's speech, which we all know that this is the 50th anniversary for him giving his famous speech Beyond Vietnam in April of 1967. And in that speech he says, "I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government."
Amen.
Little has changed since, unfortunately. Let me introduce our first speaker today, Father Pat Cunningham. We actually met last year at the Vatican in the conference there. He might tell us more about it. Father Cunningham is a member of the Catholic Order of Missionary Priests located in 15 countries around the world. He has lived and served in South Korea for many years and is an active member of the Movement for Peace and Nonviolence to Save Jeju Island. Please welcome Father Pat with me.
You can do that.
Good morning, everybody. Good to be here. Thank you for the invitation to speak with you this morning. I'm going to speak a little bit about a small little village on a small island off the south coast of South Korea, an island called Jeju. Jeju Island, the very southern part of the island, there's a small little village called Gangjang Village. And this is where this controversial naval base was constructed by the South Korean government at a projected cost of $1 billion US.
What?
$1 billion US.
Oh.
And the waters around this beautiful coastal village of Gangjang are protected by international law as they are within a UNESCO biosphere reserve. And the underwater ecology and marine life provides a very rich habitat for soft coral, with the area near Tiger Island a favourite destination for scuba divers, and the waters off Gangjang coastline represent a major habitat of the Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphin, among other endangered species. Among the people affected are those who earn a livelihood from the rich marine life, such as the famous women sea divers, or haenyeo, who usually hold their breaths as they dive to the bottom of the seabed and collect abalone and other shellfish. Construction formally began in 2011 with the building of a fence around Gurumbi Rock. Gurumbi is a sacred site for the villagers, a sacred place where people conducted ancestral rites over hundreds and hundreds of years. Just to put the situation in a geopolitical context, it is acknowledged that the base is a US-driven project aimed at containing China rather than enhancing South Korean security. In July 2012, the South Korean Supreme Court upheld the building of the base and its construction. It is expected to host US aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, and US Navy Aegis destroyers, built at Bath Iron Works in the state of Maine. I don't know how far away Maine is. I don't know where Maine is on the map. But how I found out about Maine was through the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space, and Bruce Gagnon, who's the director of that organization, and a wonderful protagonist for the campaign against the building of the base in Gangjang Village. These Aegis destroyers, one already has arrived in Gangjang. The base is built, formally operational since last year, February of last year. And just a couple of weeks ago, an Aegis destroyer paid a courtesy call to Gangjang Village. What is scandalous about this is this is a biosphere reserve acknowledged by UNESCO. It's a beautiful rocky coast, and the offshore waters were conveniently delisted to make way to enforce the building of this construction work. The geopolitical strategy must be viewed within the context of Obama's announcement of a pivot of US foreign and military policy. But it's all about containing China. It's all about using its military to control China's importation of vital resources such as oil, natural gas, and minerals, and is a very highly dangerous and provocative strategy, with the people of Jeju Island once again caught up in the crosshairs of war. In 1947-48, a massive crackdown on so-called North Korean sympathizers was conducted in Jeju Island, where between 30,000 and 60,000 people were massacred because of a scorched earth policy conducted by the US military administration and implemented by South Korean police, who were a hangover from the Japanese imperial days. So the people called this Gangjang Naval Base and its construction a second Sasam 4-3 massacre because of the environmental destruction, the desecration of Gorambi, this beautiful sacred space where people have worshipped and played for hundreds and hundreds of years. On September the 11th, September the 3rd, 2011, a 15-foot high wall was constructed to keep villagers away from this beautiful sacred space. But contrary to government expectations, the people stood up. They mobilized, they got word out, people came from the mainland, and ultimately they began to occupy Gorambi Rock and use their bodies to get in the way of the construction equipment later. In 2011, I heard some of these stories of peace activists, villagers, and priests, Father Moon Jung-hyun, and other priests sleeping on the rocks for months at a time, and stories of other people who have been arrested for obstructing this construction equipment. Others have celebrated liturgy, conducted vigils on this sacred space, and lived on this rock as a means of resistance and a way to continue the centuries-long reverence for the rocky coast as a sacred site. There's been numerous activists who have spent time in jail. Professor Yang Yun-mo, a film critic, he has spent numerous months, possibly together, he spent 4 periods in detention, in prison. He's gone on hunger strike on numerous occasions, and he has desperately undertook brave measures like throwing himself in front of these construction trucks as they entered the construction site. People have undertook very dangerous and risky civil disobedience measures to stop, to curtail, to slow down the building of this naval base since September 2011. The incredible energy coupled with the spirit of peaceful resistance that many international visitors have brought to the village have encouraged the locals and their activist counterparts to help reclaim Gangjang from the war machine, and to ensure them that this struggle is not their own isolated struggle, but it is part of a global struggle against militarism. And in 2012, February 2012, the global network led by Bruce Gagnon, in solidarity with the people of Gangjang, they held their international conference in the village, where over 20 international activists congregated, and they participated in a number of direct actions against the building of the base. There was a kayaking, the Save Our Seas kayak team. We went out on kayaks onto Gorambi Rock, and Angie Zelter from Trident Ploughshares in Britain led the way. She cut through the razor wire, and all of us fell through, went through, and all of us were subsequently arrested, detained, spent 8 hours in custody for my trouble, and was subsequently fined and had my visa cut as well. But cut from 2 years to 1 year, so, and I'm still in Korea, so it didn't really matter. But that was just one small little action that a group of international activists, together with their Korean activist counterparts and villagers, we all undertook this action together. What is very sad is that this community of villagers, a once very close-knit community, a wedge has been driven between family members, one-time friends and neighbours. Many people, pro and anti-base, are at loggerheads. They don't speak to each other. They turn the other way when they come in contact with each other. The village is split down the middle, with the Kangjong no naval base flags on one side and the Korean flags on the other side. This is what militarism does. It divides, as a policy of divide and conquer that puts people at loggerheads, that destroys sacred spaces, desecrates the environment. And our moderator friend, he mentioned that he's a member of the Quaker movement. We have Mr. Oh Chol-soon. We've only 30 Quakers living in Korea, 30. But there's one very brave man I would like to pay respect to here today, Mr. Oh Chol-soon. He's a Quaker Society of Friends and a great friend to the people of Kangjong village. He has conducted 500 consecutive days of 3 steps, 1 bow around the perimeter fence, dressed in funeral ceremonial clothes, lamenting the desecration of the environment, human rights, the sovereignty of that area. This space was enforced on these people without their approval, without consultation. And this is what continues to happen in South Korea with the Songju, with the THAAD, and this, the deployment of this missile defense system in Songju, another very small, beautiful village of melon farmers who are resisting with their one Buddhist counterparts to protect this sacred space. This is what militarism does. It destroys environments and it leads to the desecration of sacred spaces. This is Gurumbi Rock, where we staged a mass where we had an Occupy movement going on Gurumbi. We had a celebration of the Eucharist. When the Global Network Conference came to town, we celebrated, and after break, cutting through this is before we were all arrested. This is in front of the construction gate in Kangjong village. Every day since 2011, September 2011, after the building of this fence, they have celebrated the Eucharist across the road from the construction gate. And after the Eucharist, every day, ongoing even to today, this daily Eucharistic resistance, people come together of all faiths and all walks of life. They come together and to try and reclaim this sacred space, to remove it from the scourge of militarism. And they stand and sit there in front of the gate to block the construction equipment from going in and out. And this is the means by which they have slowed down the whole process. And many people have come to Kangjong village over the years, including a Nobel Peace Prize winner from Northern Ireland, I'm very happy to say. Raed Jarrar came 2 years ago with the Women Cross DMZ delegation, with Medea Benjamin, you see there. Yeah, Medea, wonderful woman. And so many other wonderful women have come to visit and to offer their solidarity with the people of Kangjong over the years. And this is what, this is what is done. Maybe maybe move on here a little bit. Bishop Peter Kang, he's a strong prophetic voice from within the Catholic tradition. He's the Bishop of Jeju Island. And he says, peace around the whole country will flow from here at Kangjong. We pray every day courageously and tenaciously at the entrance of the site, with the presence of thousands of riot cops and the threat of arrests coming from them. We have never given up hope that one day we will be able to live peacefully without the massive naval base for nuclear warships. We'll keep praying. So when you come to South Korea, please come down to Jeju and meet these incredibly beautiful people. So this is another group that I was with. No naval base. This is our banner. So this is many interfaith groups, including the Frontiers, the Quakers, Catholics, Protestants. Many groups come together to resist the building of this naval base. Many internationals from the Catholic worker movement. Art Laffin here from the Dorothy Day Catholic worker movement, a big supporter. Many people have supported us. Brian Terrell, Maury Sharon, Kathy Kelly, from Voices for Creative Nonviolence. Many people, too innumerable to mention. Bruce has been a long-time peacemaker and coordinator, Bruce Gagnon, of this network. He makes an important point, this Bruce Gagnon. He says that the movement, this non-violent resistance, this campaign, stopping the construction of the naval base on Jeju Island, is an important symbol for the international peace movement. He says it brings together all the issues: militarization, disarmament, the environment, and human rights. They're all interconnected, and they're all destroyed by the scourge of militarism. There's more people here. A few years ago, a TV crew came from Ireland. I was able to cajole and coerce a crew to come to Ireland to shoot a little documentary for Irish TV, RTE television. They came and they shot a little documentary. I have it here with me. If anybody is interested, I can pass it on to you later. And the opening of this documentary says that against the seething anger of the people of Jeju, the construction of this naval base on what locals call sacred ground, be it rock, seems unstoppable. But equally unstoppable is the sheer determination of the people in this fishing village to continue their resistance. And I think that's what we are witnessing also in Songju, the location of the deployment of this missile defense system. The people are incredibly resilient. They're incredible. And that's what inspires, incredible enough, resilient enough to impeach a corrupt President Park Geun-hye. The villagers, I suppose this is all repetition. Every year we have this peace march. From the end of July, first week in August, this peace march around the island of Jeju brings many people, internationals from Okinawa, brothers and sisters in Okinawa, particularly many of them come, and also from the United States, different organizations, Veterans for Peace, are wonderful supporters of our movement in Kangjong village. Bishop Kang also, he always leads the way. He likes to join the march, and he's a man in his 70s in the midst of the searing heat of the end of July, first week in August. He's always there leading the way, and it fills me with great pride. The consequences of military empire, I've touched on some of these issues already. It undermines the sovereignty of host nations and of villages, small communities, militarizing and colonizing the host nation's culture, assaults democracy and human rights. It seizes people's private property and damages their homes. And it also causes life-endangering military accidents and crimes that are rarely punished. Delegations have been back and forth to Okinawa as well. And I won't go into Okinawa, have a little bit, I see my time is up. So we keep our brothers and sisters resisting militarism in Okinawa in our prayers as well. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father, and thank you for sticking to the time.
I have a lot more to say, but I'll maybe privately later. Thank you. I have the documentary as well, if anybody is interested in. Yeah.
So our second speaker will be Amal Nassar. Amal Nassar. Amal and her family cultivate peace and reconciliation through children's summer camps, education for women, and inviting visitors to their West Bank farm called the Tent of Nations. Many of us have heard of this. Many of us have also heard about Dr. King's triplets of evil triplets. So I think we will hear more about it today. Please welcome Amal with me.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I am Amal. My name means hope, and what we try to do to keep hope alive.
Yes.
It's an honor and privilege for me to be here to share my story, the struggle for justice, and by challenging racism, militarism, and materialism. I want to tell about the story called the place called Tent of Nations, were located 7 kilometers southwest of Bethlehem. It's around 100 acres, where my grandfather bought this piece of land in 1916. And the Palestinian used to buy land without registration, just by shake hand. Luckily, my grandfather was wise enough to register the land. So we got the document from the Ottoman, British, Jordanian, and Palestinian. So the land is documented and registered, and the tax paid during Ottomans and British. The family lived on the farm. I grew up in a Christian family who loved the land. And the whole family lived on the farm as farmers, planting different kinds of trees. We have vine trees, olive, apple, apricots, because the family depend 100% on agriculture and farming. This piece of land, located on 950 meters above the sea level, and surrounded by 5 Israeli settlements. So the family lived in caves. The idea of living in caves is not to destroy, as farmers, not to destroy the nature, and they were satisfied to work through the day on the property, farming, agriculture, and slept the night in the caves. I grew up in one of the caves. So the family worked peacefully until 1991. Israel government declared this piece of land as a state land. This is a private property, it's not a state land. But to challenge this declaration, we put this case into a legal battle. So we started the court from 1991 until now. 26 years struggling for justice in front of the Israeli court. 12 years in front of the Israeli military court, and 13 years in front of the Supreme Court. Every time they try to put us under pressure, physically, financially, stress, in order to give up hope. Because we are seeing sometimes ourselves in front of two options: whether to continue struggle for justice or to give up hope and leave. But these two options, we are not following. We say we are going to stay. We continue struggle for justice and not to give up hope. Keep hope alive. Since I grew up in a Christian family where my father all the time say, never ever give up hope. Whatever the situation, go forward for a better situation. So during the court session, since we started from 1991, every time we have to be ready to any Israel demand. First 10 years, we hired a Palestinian lawyer to defend the case. And then after 10 years, they came up with a decision. We don't want to admit your Palestinian lawyer. You have to find an Israeli lawyer. Has to be under Israel law. And every time we receive a demand, there is a limited time to, just for 1 week, you have to find a lawyer. Otherwise, you lose the case. So we found a Palestinian lawyer. Since he lived in Jerusalem, he has Israeli ID. So we started the process from the beginning. In new maps, in new documents. Once they asked that we have to make an aerial photo from above, that we need to hire a helicopter to do this photo. And every time we see how much obstacles, difficulty, every time on the court. And we never knew that when will be the next session and what will demand from us. So we kept on defending the case, continue our work, planting trees, cultivating land. You know, as Palestinians, we live under Israeli military laws. They say if you do not use your land 3 years, it is automatically considered as a state land. And they have the right to take the absentees' land. Many Palestinians left abroad for a few years, came back, lost their right to get the land back, since they follow the Ottoman law. If you do not use your land 3 years, automatically considered as a state land. Other court session, they ask, we don't want to admit your document you have to bring eyewitnesses. So around the farm, we have a Palestinian village where farmers, they were working, helping my family since many, many years, in 1930s. And then we asked around 20 farmers to come with us to the court and to witness as they ask. So we have to hire a bus, around 50 people with the whole family member and 25 farmers. And we have to go to Ramallah, Israeli court. We waited there 5 hours, nothing happened. And then a soldier came out and they say, we don't need witnesses, you have to go home. Postponing the case. Every time kept us really under stress, physical, big burden amount of money to pay lawyers, documents. It's not easy because for human being is very easy to get frustrated and give up hope.
Yes.
According to, in 1993, according to Oslo Agreement, you know, Palestine divided into 3 areas, A, B, and C. A, under Palestinian Authority control, B, a combination between Israeli-Palestinian, C, totally under Israel control. So they consider this piece of land under Area C, Israel control. What does it mean for the Palestinians who own the land are not allowed to have a building permit? And everything we have on the farm, it's illegal. Where 5 settlements on the surrounding, where they have villas, electricity, water 24 hours. On the farm, we have no running water. We depend 100% as the family, we're digging a cistern. So we continue to dig cistern to get water until now. So last year we celebrated 100 years being on the farm. And this year you are welcome to come with us in May to celebrate 101. Yeah. So we continue our work. since they, according to Oslo Agreement, I call it this is a kind of materialism because they look for the land without people. As Israelis, fundamentalists who was surrounded us, always look for the land without people. And also they try to create fact on the ground. If they want piece of land, they just bring bulldozer, open a road, bring trailers, and invite families, and they make it fact. Since we are surrounded by settlements, 5, we have several harassment by settlers on the surrounding. In 2002, they tried to open a road, first Israeli invasion on the farm. In the middle of the night, bulldozers came to open a road through our property to destroy all these trees being planted since many years. We could hardly stop this project from the settlers, and since we are in Area C, we are not allowed to call Palestinian police, so we called the Israeli police. Israeli police came and saw all the settlers surrounding the area, armed, weaponed, and they were very aggressive, saying, this is our land, this is a promised land, we have paper from God, all this. And then the police ordered, you have to leave the land. You have to go legally to the court and claim that it's a state land. You cannot come and attack people on their property. But before, they were very angry. Before they left, they uprooted 250 olive trees. And then people always ask, after all this destruction, what you can do now? Because easily to give up hope and leave. So as many people did it. We say no, the plan always to plant the new trees. With the help and support of international volunteers and supporters, physically, financially, to sponsor a tree and plant it, we did planted a new trees. And we also, the story was heard different places, and a group of Jewish came from United Kingdom and then came, sponsored 200 olive trees and planted by their hands. When I see people like this, I don't lose hope. I say still peace is possible in Palestine, Israel. We continue our work. As my father, all his life, my father died in 1976, and then all his life has a dream to devote part of his land as a meeting point between local and internationals. So my father believed in dialogue. He said, we will never achieve peace by shake hand. We have to work on people, start from the grassroots, because peace comes from bottom to top, not from top to bottom.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what we do, the idea is to invite people from all over with different background, culture, and religion coming together. The idea and the purpose is to build bridges between people and the people and land. Come together for hope, understanding, reconciliation, dialogue to achieve peace in Palestine, Israel. This is the only way that we can achieve peace in Palestine, Israel. Since we are still in Area C, under Israel control, we have received several demolition orders. On the farm, we don't have really a normal house to live. It's a metallic roof, because we are not allowed to build a concrete house. So we received several demolition orders from the water cistern, from the tent. We have campsites for the international coming and stay in the tents. We received demolition order, but unfortunately, they never came and give handle by hand as owner of the land the demolition order. They just throw it everywhere. They choose a windy day, wet, And then limited time when you have to keep an eye to find this demolition order. If we miss the time, they come and destroy everything. So in 2014, it was May 19, we were working on the orchard in the valley, where big orchard of fruitful trees, as figs, almond, apricot, apple, all kind. And we found papers written in Hebrew that we have to run every time to the lawyer to see what is going on here. And then it's written on that paper that you are working on the land belong to the state of Israel. No. And then we took people to appeal. So Israel authority accept the appeal as private. But after a few days, we were all of a sudden, bulldozers came at 3 a.m. in the morning with 3 bulldozers, uprooted 1,500 trees. Yes. And then again, the question came, what you are going to do now with all this destruction? Since we say we are not, as Palestinians living under difficult situation, we see ourselves in front of several options. A group of Palestinians took a decision to immigrate. Others resignate. Third, they say, no, I want to stay on my land, and every time I receive action, I want to react. And all the time in Palestine, Israel, act, react, a circle of violence never ends. But the option we took at the Tent of Nations, we say no, we want to stay on our land, continue struggle for justice, act in a positive way. So the plan is always there to plant a new trees. And then, as we were interviewed by different media, they say, what you can say about all this destruction? We say that God may forgive them, for they don't know what they do. Yeah. And to plant a new trees. Yeah. And it's truly happened I'm really very grateful for really global internationals who come volunteering, physically, sponsoring, financially, to come and see and plant an olive tree. And we did it. 1,500 trees already planted on that area.
Wow.
Yeah. So, as to say that we continue our work, struggling for justice, we say we have to go forward to break this circle of violence. What we do, we work with children. We have activities throughout the year with children, young people, youth exchange, and women empowering project. The idea is to invest our frustration and depression into a positive thing. To try to transform pain into a constructive power. So those women, we have a small center in the village nearby the farm, and we teach as local and international, coming and volunteer helping us. We teach English language, computer. We work with women, young women. They are living under stress and depression. And the idea, the purpose to work with those women, because they will have a big effect on the young generation. To grow up young, healthy generation, grow without hatred, that to learn how together we can accept, respect each other, background, culture, and religion. The most important that we have to deal with each other as a human being. So we work with children around, we have summer camps throughout the year. Children, around 80 to 90 kids coming to the place, learning together, Muslim, Christian, all together, learning about environment, music, handicraft, painting, to express their anger in a positive way. And we asked once one child, what you would like to do, what you wish for future. This child, 12 years old, he say, I wish to die. And we asked him, hey, why? Why you should say so? And he said, because my father was killed by the military in the Intifada, and I want now to go now quickly and to see my father. So we thought that we have to work on this young boy. We asked him during the summer camp we give him a camera, and we told him, you have to make documentation for this summer camp. You are responsible to do this schedule every day, to make pictures and to write what we have done this day, to get him busy in a positive way. And then at the end of the summer camp, he did it very well. And then again we ask, because we make evaluation for the children at the end of the camp. We ask him the same question, what you wish for future? He say, I wish to be a famous photographer. Yeah. So, things is changed. So, as we say that we always think and believe as Christians that we have not to repay evil with evil, but evil with good. Yes, this is our message. Under the slogan, we refuse to be enemies. And then we believe as well, as if we knew tomorrow will be the end of the world, we go outside our garden and plant an olive tree. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Amal. I am half Palestinian. My father's family is from Palestine, and I always feel very proud to hear speakers from the 10th of Nation, because they are an amazing example of Palestinian resistance. And thank you for coming to the US to tell us these stories. The third speaker today is Ezekiel Gebissa. Ezekiel is a professor of history and African studies at Kettering University in Michigan. He is the recipient of numerous awards, including Outstanding Researcher Award, and author of numerous articles, book chapters, encyclopedia entries, and books. Please join me in welcoming Ezekiel.
Thank you very much. It's always difficult to speak after people who can tell village-level stories about cases that are well known. Here I'm asked to speak about specifically on how militarism has impacted African communities, their economies, their culture, and their human rights. Talking about a continent in general, where they could talk about specific locals. It's going to be difficult, but I will try my best. But regardless, I am very grateful for the invitation to speak. Particularly, I'm thankful that Dr. Anedi co-invited me. And I'm also grateful to my friend, the Reverend Dr. Gambachuma Olana and Bonnie Holcomb. I don't know where she is.
Yes, here she is.
There you go. Yeah. They did everything to convince the organizers that I am not just a nutty professor who has no business speaking to people of faith, but I thank you for your efforts anyways. I am, as I said, specifically speaking about the impact of militarism in general and the U.S. Role in promoting militarism in Africa in general. But militarism and its impact on human life is not just an academic issue for me. Last week I was in Europe, traveling in Europe, in Norway, in Switzerland, and in Germany, and I had the opportunity to meet people, thousands of refugees and asylum seekers from the Horn of Africa. These are just the survivors of the perilous journey from the Horn of Africa through the desolate Sahara Desert, through the dangerous territories now known as Libya, and the treacherous waters of the Mediterranean. These are young men and women fleeing repression perpetrated by two regimes ruled by military men turned politicians in Ethiopia and Eritrea. So I do speak, even though my lens through which I look at the world is that of a social scientist, but I also speak about warm and breathing truth, about human beings losing their lives to flee repression from the Horn of Africa. I also speak as a person of faith who believes that the church's mission on earth is to serve both the spiritual and the material needs of a person. Now, thousands perish over the Mediterranean when their overloaded boats overturn. We can pray for their safety, but we can also engage the United States government to make policy choices that don't assist the repression that causes the migration to occur in the first place. We, as Americans, we can cast off the blinders of patriotic self-abnegation and pressure the government to live up to its creeds, as the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King once said. Now, regarding U.S. militarism, there are two competing views in the world. One says that the United States military is a force for peace that patrols the sea lanes and to make international trade possible. It has, over the last 60 or 70 years, that served as a deterrent against the outbreak of the Third World War. Others maintain that the United States undertaken reckless military adventures that destabilized nations, causing tremendous suffering to occur. Now, those who believe that the United States military force is a force for peace affirm the United States' self-appointed role as a leader of the free world and argue that the United States is constitutively incapable of military aggression. The idea is rooted in the theory known as perpetual peace, first enunciated by the philosopher Immanuel Kant. The premise of Kant's theory of perpetual peace is that democratic constitutional republics, if all nations are democratic constitutional republics, there would be no aggressor nations and the occurrence of war does not exist. Now, but the question is, the question remains, is the United States a constitutional democratic republic incapable of aggression?
Good question.
Does the reluctance of the citizens to support war and its related cost restrain the United States leaders from engaging in conflicts with other nations? I personally believe, following arguably the most influential Protestant theologian of the 20th century, Reinhold Niebuhr, the U.S.'s self-appointed role as the leader of the free world and a guardian of democracy around the world is the basis of the hubris that often blinds the U.S. policymakers to understanding the limits of power and considering the interest of others. Niebuhr posits that the pride leads individuals and nations to overreach themselves in their quest for security and self-preservation. The sinful reality of human nature, Niebuhr asserts, often makes humans choose power as a protection against competitors. This situation is more conspicuous at the level of a nation, where the need for dignity and security leads citizens to believe that government institutions, including the military, can provide them security and dignity by exercising power over internal and external enemies. Niebuhr observes that the belief in the primacy of power is neither the deficiency, and I want you to listen to this, says that it's neither the deficiency inherent in certain cultures, nor the result of unique historical circumstances, but a reality that applies to all kinds of political systems. The advantage of democracies over totalitarian regimes, Niebuhr says, is not that they understand the limits of power, but that they have the capacity, better capacity for self-correction. But there is nothing inherent in the US policy-making apparatus that prevents its leaders from self-delusional claim that the greatest and the strongest military in the world can ensure security for its citizens. There is nothing inherent in the fact that the US is a constitutional democracy that prevents its leaders from embarking on aggression in the name of defending US national interests. Not knowing the limits of power is a weakness firmly inherent in human nature, and human institutions are particularly incapable of considering the interest of others. Institutions cannot have sympathy for other human beings. What we have today in the United States is a national security state, and it doesn't understand the limits of power. And it's incapable of course correction unless pressured by citizens. Social justice, harmonious societies, and peaceful coexistence are impossible unless citizens use non-violent coercion to rein in the immoral characters of human institutions. This is why your activism is critical in pushing back on the militaristic impulses that are self-evident today more than ever before. So that is really what makes my appearance here, standing before you, important for me. Now, Africa, and that's the point, that Africa, militarism has been the enemy of social justice, good governance, and economic development since Africans actually came into contact with the rest of the world. In that respect, one could cite slavery, which is a military system, or colonialism, which is also a military system. Yes. Both of these episodes in history have impacted long-term African possibilities for good governance, for economic growth, and for peace. The United States was not an imperialist nation, but in the post-World War II, locked in competition with the Soviet Union, was determined to win this competition that made it completely blind to human suffering everywhere. That is, the question of winning was so inculcated in the policy-making apparatus that the superpower idea had made the United States support the most vicious dictatorial governments around the world, and that happened in Africa as well. And I want to talk about two things, and then I will stop. The first one is the militarization of the state in Africa. And this was supported not just by the United States, but also allies in Europe. Now, the first one is that when the colonial state left, in place a tradition of repression and oppression that was bequeathed to the new African leaders. So beginning in the 1950s, the new independent African governments fell prey to the rapacity of the army leaders who were trained by the colonial system to compel citizens to accept the hegemony of the colonial state. They did not know better. So between 1952 and the year that the Young Officers Movement overthrew from power King Farouk of Egypt. In 1968, which closed out with a bloodless coup in Mali, there were 70 staged and planned military coup d'etats. 70. 20 of which led to the establishment of new army-led governments. Benin had 6 successful coups d'etat through 1972. Nigeria had 5. Ghana had 6. And the French-speaking states had all fallen to military rule by the late 1960s. And by the 1970s, military coup d'etat happened with frightening regularity and remained the most frequent means of change of government through the 1980s in Africa. And the human and the material cost of the regimes, the military regimes, is really staggering. And I can cite 3 examples to illustrate this point. Jean Bedel Bokassa of the Central African Republic squandered huge sums of his poor country's revenue upon himself and his friends and the president of the French Republic, and including his own notorious imperial coronation, which cost 20 million, 80 million by the standards of today, and literally bankrupting the country. He personally supervised judicial killings and the massacre of 100 school children simply for refusing to buy uniforms from his wife's establishment. He had instituted laws where thieves that had thieves cut off their 2 ears for the first 2 offenses and had a hand cut off for the 3rd. Throughout his reign, he was supported. Bokassa was supported by the French, militarily, financially, and diplomatically.
Wow.
Another example is Macias Nguema's Equatorial Guinea, who was responsible for torture and death and untold thousands of people who he considered his opponents. On Christmas Eve of 1975, he had about 100 of his opponents killed in a football stadium by soldiers dressed in Santa Claus outfit. And during his despotic regime, the country's educated class was eradicated. Some 80,000 people were reported to have been killed, and 1/3 of the population had fled the country. And the economy has completely collapsed. And this is an oil-producing country. The third one is Idi Amin, otherwise known as the tyrant of Uganda, is widely known for his unparalleled ruthlessness. As president, Amin followed an erratic, tyrannical, and increasingly bloody course that left the country in shambles. He expelled about 70,000 Asians in 1972, nationalized their properties, and up to 300,000 Ugandans were killed during his reign. And he is credited for destroying one of the country's most thriving agricultural economies. And during his rule, Amin had the support of the United States Central Intelligence Agency, which delivered bombs and other military equipments and in a military operations exercise in Uganda. Now, Africa's military rulers were supported one way or the other, either by the Soviet Union or by the United States. And one example is in the Horn of Africa, where in 1975, a military ruler expelled the United States from Ethiopia, and at the same time, military rulers in the Sudan and in Somalia expelled the Soviets.
Yeah.
The Soviets came to Ethiopia, and the Americans went to Somalia and to Sudan. Now, in the 1990s, the so-called third wave of democratization reached Africa, and the military regimes became obsolete on the African political scene. To this, the military regimes responded by civilianizing their regimes by conducting and winning elections. Controlled elections, fake elections.
Right.
So the dictators adjusted to the demands of the time by embracing the trappings of democracy and the rituals of election, but their governance did not change at all. It didn't matter to the United States. The United States supported these regimes and still supports, as I will come and talk about the militarization of the economy, something new that is happening in the world. Now, this is the political side, the militarization of politics and the state. But today, the biggest threat to social justice in Africa is presented by the militarization of the economy. The end of the Cold War rendered the market economy a global model for states to follow, and economic liberalization measures require substantial cuts in public expenditure, including the military spending. The prescription for the market economy was the result of what is known as the Washington Consensus. In managing economies, this is known as the Washington Consensus because they believed that at least three, the U.S. Treasury, the Bretton Woods institutions of the World Bank and the IMF, and the Washington think tanks believed that the market economy is the only kind of economy that is appropriate to countries everywhere, regardless of the local situation. So compelled to conform to these laws, two states that I will talk about adopted this model. But what would an army that is denied, whose supply was cut, is going to do? Taking over the state through coup d'etat had become obsolete. So what they did was, in the case of Egypt, under Hosni Mubarak, three major military bodies were created, and they became active participants in the economy. These institutions in Europe, they produce a wide variety of goods: steel, cement, chemicals. Let me put it in only sectoral terms: in manufacturing, in agriculture, in service industries. They do everything, even though these are military institutions. The military is supposed to defend a country, not to do business. But because this is the way to adjust to the Washington Consensus. What happened to this? What happened? So that what happened is that the military enjoyed great leverage on the state. But as you all know, in 2011, pro-democracy demonstrators brought down the Mubarak regime. A new constitution was drafted. Elections were held, and Egyptians elected their representatives and a president democratically. But the democratically elected government became a threat to the interests of the military. So the military took over. The military commander, the top military commander, General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, removed the democratically elected government from power and made himself president. Since then, he has reconstituted repression. Many people say that the repression in Egypt today is worse than the time under Mubarak. The same thing happened in Ethiopia as well. That is the militarization of the economy, that they created an institution called METEC, whose official task was technology transfer. According to the proclamation that instituted the METEC, this was supposed to be helping in technology transfer, not to engage in the private sector. But they do. They manufacture just about everything. They are in construction, they are in energy, in transportation, in agriculture. There is no sector of the economy in which the military is a player. What does this do in both Egypt and Ethiopia? If a military has its own source of revenue, that it is not controlled by taxes and the people, it becomes a dangerous institution. So, that's what happened in Egypt, and that's what happened in Ethiopia, the militarization of the economy itself. It's not only that they participate in the private sector, but military generals, retired military generals, are in charge of government regulations, a government institution that have anything to do with the economy. So, because my time is up, all I want to say is that there is the state of emergency in Ethiopia in which the civilian government is basically immobilized, and under the state of emergency is ruled by a command post called the military. President Obama in August of 2016, he goes to Ethiopia and stands beside the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, who had just won 100% of the seats in parliament. and had the temerity to say that these were democratically elected. I think the United States Congress is trying to do something about it. When you go to Capitol tomorrow, you can tell your representative that the United States should revise its policy of supporting totalitarian military regimes by supporting a bill that has been introduced in the House of Representatives to limit the capacity of the government to draw. Look, Ethiopia is the largest recipient of military and economic aid from the United States to the tune of $1.6 billion every year. That would be a substantial leverage. So when you go to the Congress, please talk to your representatives so that life is better in the future, at least for Ethiopians, and as is the case in Egypt as well. Thank you.
What's the bill number?
128, H.R. 128, yeah.
So thank you for our three speakers. This was amazing. We have 7 minutes until the end of the panel. So we will take a round of quick questions from you. Let's take 3 questions and see if we can answer them. I don't see other people with mics. So let's just take 3 quick questions. I see a hand up here.
Hi, I'm going to be talking to a Republican tomorrow who's a spawn of Trump, and I want to influence him because we know that certain international aid is important, and I think he will respond to questions about ROI or something that will be in his interest. So how do I influence the spawn of Trump? I mean, we just heard stop funding totalitarians. He'll like that because it'll cost him less. How do I tell him what to fund, what not to fund, in a few minutes so he'll listen?
Good question. Any questions from the back? From that side? Okay, let's hear this question.
As the Canadian in the crowd, I want to say something about the fact that the U.S. has spent decades.
Question.
Well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That says something.
I have a question for Professor Kettering. I was wondering, my understanding recently is the United States is building a nuclear arms site in Africa, along with military bases that are primarily U.S. bases and training the local African people. I'm sorry I couldn't find my email that told me which countries these were in, but I think one was Nigeria. But I was wondering if you could speak to that issue, please.
And we'll take one last question before we get to the answers. There's one there.
A short question for Amal. Thank you for your witness in Palestine. You mentioned bulldozers that come and took out olive trees and then the fruit trees. What is the brand name on the bulldozer or the maker of those bulldozers?
Good question.
Excellent questions. So let's start with the panelists to see who would like to comment. Father Pat, would you like to comment on something?
To the last question, Hyundai heavy industries are complicit in war crimes in the occupied territories of Palestine because of their earth removal equipment. Hyundai, or Hyundai, as you may be more familiar with, they're part of the earth removal equipment, that's as far as I know, and bulldozers. Yeah.
And Father Pat, would you like to comment on any of the other questions?
I think just military, I'm Irish, so I don't have any representatives in Congress, but coming from Korea, I'm conscious of the deployment of the THAAD missile defense system in Songju, which will cost the US taxpayer and the Korean taxpayer a lot of money. According to Al Jazeera, maybe $1.25 billion is the cost of the deployment of this missile defense system in this small little village of Songju in South Korea. $1.25 billion. You got to ask questions.
Professor Gebissa, would you like to comment on the question?
Yeah, on the Republican, there are many Republicans who have co-sponsored the bill. So they're not ideologically opposed, or they're not just towing the party line. They are. It's possible to convince them. Secondly, on the military or the aid, foreign aid, I think Mr. Trump wants to cut foreign aid in general. So not cut all the economic aid, but the military and the direct budget support for those governments. It's possible. It might even go with what they want to do. So they're not out of reach. It's possible to convince the Republicans as well.
What I want is for them to support the Rite Aid, the humanitarian aid.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the harder.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, correct. I agree with that. The second one on the nuclear weapon, I think I don't know about the weapons part of it, but what I know is that there is the President Obama's initiative, Power Africa, where electrification is the goal. And in that case, maybe for civilian use, to use nuclear power for electricity is probably the case. I don't really quite know about weapon. What I know about the Africa Command is known as AFRICOM. AFRICOM had been trying to establish a base or for the headquarters for the Africa Command. No African country could take it. So it is in Germany. The Africa Command is in Germany because no African country would invite the United States to come and establish the headquarters. But they have secret agreements like using the drones from the territory of Ethiopia. The pilots are in Nevada. The drone takes off from southern Ethiopia, cross over the Red Sea, and drops bombs and kills some civilians in Yemen, and then comes back. That's the kind of thing that is not really well known. But even though public pressure had also removed that from Ethiopia.
And Amal?
Of course, the name of the bulldozers from the Caterpillar, and they're all throughout the occupied territories. It's for destruction, not for construction, unfortunately.
That's a great question, and I have also a comment about military aid. My organization and many groups here have been involved in trying to hold our government accountable by looking at which countries we've been sending military aid and military sales to. So it's not only about U.S. direct military intervention, but it's also about indirect intervention. And for that, I suggest you keep an eye out and ask members of Congress tomorrow about U.S. military sales. We have sold hundreds of billions of dollars worth of weapons to regions like the Middle East, where there is a raging war and violence there, and other parts of the world. And of course, military aid. The U.S. gives billions of dollars of military aid every year. A bunch of it goes to the Middle East. Actually, almost 90% of the foreign military financing goes to the Middle East. 3.8 billion to Israel, 1.3 billion to Egypt. So it's not only against international law in many cases to fund these groups and militias who are committing human rights abuses and crimes. It's against our domestic law. And you have to bring this up, try to bring it up tomorrow. It's against our domestic law to give military aid to groups that are committing human rights abuses. There is the Leahy law. You can read about the Leahy laws that prevent us from giving human rights aid to human rights abusers. There are the Arms Export Act that prevent us from selling weapons to human rights abusers. There is Presidential Policy Directive 27 that prevents the U.S. from transferring weapons. So this is, I think, it comes back to the issue of this panel. Our interventions are not only by dropping bombs, it's also by facilitating proxy groups to commit these crimes. We're out of time. I want you all to join me in thanking our speakers today. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Thank you.